Hello, Compassion Ambassadors. Thank you for joining us. I'm here with my neurotherapy guru, Marty Wetke from the Wetke Institute. And today we're going to talk about brain on fire, not being all in your head, which has been a topic that I have learned way too intimately in the last 2 years. So can you tell me a little bit, Marty, about your work with the Wetke Institute and what your mission is there?
Okay. I started this about 35 years ago working inpatient hospital in Georgia. And my interest has been in repairing brain issues, both psychological and physical organic issues, using feedback. So using the body's natural ability to alter what's going on inside it chemically, physically, and so on. So what came along in my search for the best method I could find was brainwave biofeedback. And I was in a remarkable situation in that I had 35 inpatient clients, substance abuse, depression, anxiety, traumatic brain injury, and I could test out these methods. I did that for I think 13 years before I started spreading outside of the hospital, and sort of that whole direction and bringing it more to the general public. I brought it to Europe and so on. So the mission is really about that the brain, when directed correctly, can self-regulate. Now it's sort of well understood. It's not this metaphysical principle anymore. The brain can self-regulate if given the opportunity. That's why things like mindfulness and meditation are becoming so well known now, because it's a process of what we call self-directed neuroplasticity. So when there is a problem like depression, like Lyme's disease, like inflammation, like anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, the brain takes a hit. And if we can see exactly what's happening by actually looking at the brain, we can train the brain to ameliorate a lot of the symptoms and a lot of the activity that is actually pathologically stable, that is supporting the symptoms. So we found very early on this has tremendous efficacy. And as you know, I'm involved in big projects with the California government here, trying to reduce recidivism rates among parolees. I mean, this is being recognized in Florida. There are several military bases where they're using this with the guys coming back from war zones with head injury and PTSD. This works, and it is non-invasive. It's not a drug or a medication, so you don't have to worry about all these side effects and negative things. So my mission is just to keep pushing this, getting this out there. We're on the verge of another, what I believe will be explosion of information about this, because so many people are getting involved right now. And it will be more common, like there's occupational therapy and physical therapy. You'll see neurofeedback therapy. So here I am, continuing with my mission, just trying to have a treatment center here, but we're also doing remote training, which is a nice thing, because it was very hard to refer people who would call me from halfway around the world and say, I want to do neurofeedback. I can't afford to come see you. What do I do? So we started the remote training where we actually send them the equipment, and then we run, it's usually 20 sessions. They go through the process. We actually run their sessions for them. That's working way beyond what I thought. It's extremely successful. We're getting really good results that way. So that solved one of the problems. But this needs to be in schools. It needs to be in treatment centers. It needs to be in hospitals. And I really believe in 5 or 10 years it will be, as I said, very common. So we're on the verge of all that right now. So I'm just pushing ahead.
Yes, and I feel so blessed, even though we came together in what were painful circumstances for me. I feel blessed to, have been gifted to have the opportunity to be with you every day and sort of see the way you work with the brain, the relationship that you have with it. And I also just am so grateful to you because you straight up saved my life. I for 20 years have been really struggling with neuroinflammatory issues. It's been up and down and all over the place over the years. including phases of thinking that I had completely was never going to be an issue again, and then boom, it would come back. But in end of 2017, it reached a really scary level. And I literally was also having severe PTSD, sort of expressive episodes. And so, you know, I had 5 very somatic experiencing releases within a 4 to 5 week period. I remember I called our mutual friend, Amy Serene, up at 40 Years of Zen, Dr. Drew Pearson, and I was like, I dedicate myself to science. Does anyone want me? Because I don't know what's going on. I don't know how to stop it. Nothing I've ever done before is working, and I'm scared. And they said, call Marty. You know, he is the absolute best in the clinical fields. You know, they definitely, up at 40 Years of Zen, they're doing optimization and training and pushing. And basically Drew was like, we can't do anything with a brain like yours. Marty needs to stabilize you and repair you before I can even look at you. So, you know, because of course I have this obsession with.
Yeah, I get all the easy.
You get all the easy stuff. Yeah. I'm like, no, just train my brain to be superhuman. It's like, wait, we have to back up. So, you know, when you brain mapped me and you so clearly showed me what was happening with my brain, you know, I was really pissed off, really devastated, really scared, and then also hugely relieved. But I was pissed off because I have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars over a 20-year period. Everyone acted like they had no idea what was going on. I went through years of trying every freaking medication under the sun. I abandoned Western medicine, went to integrative medicine. I've done everything. Not one person mapped my brain.
Yeah.
You know, I spent 2 weeks in a hospital in 2000 with meningitis and encephalitis. They let me out of there without mapping my brain. And that makes me like, I've never been an advocate in my life. And I know that I will be for the rest of my life now, because that is just wrong.
Yeah.
We are medicating children. We are medicating, you know, people saying that they have mental, you know, illnesses and so forth. And it's not that those don't exist, but I think that we're over medicating without any hard understanding or real understanding of what's happening with their brain. And I think there's a lot of people with broken brains out there.
I think Daniel Amen, you know, the Amen Clinics, very brilliant, famous fellow, written books, Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. He says pretty much the same thing, that it is a travesty that when a psychiatrist prescribes medication, that they don't look at what the brain's doing.
How's that even legal? Like, it's just wrong.
It's just the way it is. But I think psychiatric medicine is moving more in that direction now. There are databases that even can tell you if this medication is going to work or not. I mean, why not just do that? So, or if this person has a particular sensitivity and so on. So I agree with you. I think it's a mess right now. But I think there's people out there paying attention, like Daniel Amen, and there's many neurologists that I know who are now saying, hey, like the title is not all in your head, but it is in your head, it's your brain. And if we can approach it from that direction, this is not just some psychological, it's not that your mother didn't love you when you were young. Your brain has a very specific reaction pattern that creates inflammation, creates patterns that are repetitive, and again, what we call pathological instability. So I think it's moving. I think it's changing.
That's really huge and life-changing for me, because 20 years ago when I, you know, first was struck with this chronic illness, I then turned to, this must all be because of the trauma I had in my childhood, because there was a lot of it. And so I have been, you know, warrioring the path of every type of trauma therapy you can imagine.
Sure.
And it's all, you know, sure, it's interesting to go that deep inside, but, you know, I reached my wit's end when I had those 5, you know, explosive expressions in somatic experiencing, and for them to keep whipping me the way they were whipping me when I was no longer emotionally attached to these things. I was like, stop everything. This is, I mean, this is no longer, I'm not working hard enough on my trauma, or
Yeah.
my trauma is making me sick, or my old stories, or, the things our communities, which are beautiful, that we want to create our own reality and all these things. But, my friends who were telling me if I would just listen to Joe Dispenza, I would get well. If I would, and then when I land in your office and you're like, well, sure, listen to those things, but let's look at what's actually happening in your brain. First of all, I
Yeah.
can't believe you're not in the hospital right now, was the first thing you said to me.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my God, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for knowing.
Yeah. I hear that a lot. The confirmation and frankly tears that occur with people when they see that. I'll be frank with you. What they usually say is, "I'm glad to say I'm not just crazy.
Right.
That there really is an issue here." And it's not to say that these traumas don't start a process that ends up making us susceptible. I mean, I think every one of your listeners should look up the ACEs test. ACE, ACEs is adverse childhood experiences. There's a direct correlation between ACE scores and problems later on in life, everything from cardiovascular disease to you name it. So, I mean, it's useful to say, oh, wow, there is this potentially precipitory experience. But then it's not so much about releasing the trauma as it is about getting the brain, like the brain's very interesting. It's designed for survival. And it fools us into believing that a trauma that may have happened 10, 20, 30 years ago is happening right now. And so it recreates that whole physiology of the actual traumatic event. And here we are again. We might as well be there. It's tricking us for a reason so that we're prepared just in case. But so you've got to approach it from every angle. And as you said, with you, it was, well, here's how your brain has responded to this now. Let's work on this. Trauma recovery work is essential for some people, but you better get the brain fixed too, because that's where these deep pathways, these deep grooves, really get stuck. So
exactly. Yeah. And thanks to you, and thanks to that experience, not to say that it was easy by any means. I feel like I experienced death. It's like we had to go to the 0 point of the old pattern,
mm-hmm.
and then we created the healthy pattern.
Mm-hmm. Sure, exactly.
And not going through that 0 point, that was rough,
Yeah.
And I mean, the only way I could make it through was just your dedication and sort of consistent presence. And, it's like, we got there. And I can say I'm the healthiest I've ever been emotionally. And I now am able to face, for me, now there's just a biological issue of, pathogenic pathogens, labeled as Lyme disease and meningitis, encephalitis, or viruses and bacteria that have to be dealt with.
Yeah.
So I'm dealing with that. And I feel like that was an interesting thing too, is it was really brilliant. At one point you almost gave up on me. I remember. I said, please, Marty, don't give up. I have nowhere to go. You said, okay, one more try. What do you think we should do? And we just decided, well, let's treat this like an autoimmune disease.
Mm-hmm.
So which just so happens you have like a lot of experience with autoimmune disease. Talk to me a little bit about how neurofeedback can impact autoimmune disease.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have to trace the source of most autoimmune disease or failure. And it some of them arise from external exposures. Some of them are genes that get triggered inappropriately or that don't have to be triggered. But they usually, if you trace the pathways in the brain back, they go to stress mechanisms, particular tract in the brain called the locus coeruleus. And so it's not that I'm treating or trying to cure an autoimmune disease. I'm just going back to these fundamental foundational pathways in the brain that have to do with managing stress at a very deep level. So that's really the key. I've found anyway, if you can take the pressure off, take some of the stress off in the brain, well, then the brain starts to reorganize itself.
Mm.
And the hope is that down the road, these autoimmune illnesses that have manifested, the brain can start to quiet things down and repair, and then ultimately quiet down the autoimmune responses. So, it's not that we're directly treating autoimmune. What we're doing is we're just basically trying to normalize the brain.
Okay.
And when the brain is normalized, you're going to see all kinds of problems, psychological problems, emotional problems, physical problems. You're going to see them begin to ameliorate.
Mm-hmm.
Some won't, but my experience in 35 years is a remarkable amount of issues get cleared up when you normalize brain function.
Well, you completely, I wrote a blog about it called my Predator PhD. You completely, completely reoriented me to Predator, which was something that I didn't have an understanding of because trauma started
Mm-hmm.
at such a young age that
Mm-hmm.
I went from, the developmental childhood trauma happening within my family to then, workplace trauma, just
Yeah.
attracting the bully, the tyrannical, the extreme narcissist, but like white collar style.
Sure. Yeah, right.
So then you don't think you're being abused, but then you don't realize that you are. And it was
Yeah.
just so interesting to go through that reorientation, which I was aware of the reorientation, the way it came in layers, and the understanding that shifted was incredible. I mean, I guess that's what you would call awakening, right?
Exactly. You're seeing that most trauma, childhood trauma as well, has a domino effect throughout your life.
Mm-hmm.
Like here, we had the mudslides and the fires in Santa Barbara, approximately a year ago, beginning January. And everybody was getting triggered again.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of rain, but there was no mudslides, no fires. But that's what happens with trauma. It's like our amygdala gets, it's like the brain's centering it, and it gets on guard.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the same situation or similar situation, person, place, or thing. Be on alert. And then the whole stress thing starts again.
Mm-hmm.
But when you recognize it, it reduces some of the power. The problem is the parts of the brain that respond are limbic. They're very deep, fight or flight.
You
Primitive
can't really
parts of the
think your way
brain.
out of it. So it's not all in your head.
Exactly.
Point.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, the stress mechanisms that get set off for survival are powerful, and they really put a big strain on the brain and body and the adrenal glands. I mean, that's really also primary, and that's one of the problems with you, trying to get your adrenals back up to function. So.
Yeah, for sure. But the other side of that reorientation was just the attraction, the magnetism to the predator because of the familiarity.
Yeah.
You were explaining to me about
Sure.
how it looks,
Sure.
knows. So.
Yeah, familiarity, it's challenging. We go back to the known versus the unknown, even if the known is clearly destroying us. That's what substance abuse is, by the way. Yeah.
Which is because you said something that really made sense to me. It was because even though it's dangerous, it's where the nervous system feels safe because that's where it has been set.
Exactly.
A set point, and so it always wants that set point. So it thinks what's unsafe is safe. So that's what was happening in my life, So I'm still unwinding all of that and just really in awe of how that works and how it really comes down to, like you said, you're working with frequency to retrain the brain. And it's so beautiful that it's possible. It's not only possible, we need to be, using it as a tool, I think, for kids with learning disabilities, in advancing healing in hospitals, even if you're healing from something else. I mean, to me, it's just like, it's a no-brainer, no pun intended. And so I'm really excited about that. And I'm on your team for life. So
awesome. Your listeners should remember one thing. What we've identified is this neuroplasticity, as you're saying, the brain if we worry, we have anger, we have fear all the time, guess what? Your brain is going to organize itself around those pathways. But we're categorizing certain things into self-directed neuroplasticity. So taking advantage of self-directed neuroplasticity. In other words, being intentional with our thoughts, and not just doing wishful thinking and being in denial, but actually being very intentional with where our thoughts go. So things like meditation and mindfulness take advantage of that. But neurofeedback is the primary tool that takes advantage of neuroplasticity. The brain wants to reorganize itself appropriately. It wants to function optimally. It wants to relieve stress, but you have to show it. You have to point to it, because basically what it's doing, if there's trauma, is it's protecting, and the protecting becomes maladaptive. So if your listeners remember anything, it's just this notion of self-directed neuroplasticity. That's the key here.
Well, I love that, because you're taking it to the next level. And I think this is one of the most important things. I'm going to want to, talk about this more with you. And I hope someday we're talking about it on stages. I will talk about it until I die. It is not helpful to tell people who are in trouble emotionally or even, in terms of a health challenge, that they can think their way out of it.
Yeah.
Because the thoughts are bi-directional. Yes, our thoughts do create our reality, and there is a relationship. What I learned sitting in that chair with you was that the relationship's bi-directional. So I have been using so much will, and I am so dedicated to my practices, and and it's just, I've been going for it. And when I was going for it, and I was still having an issue, and then I was still getting that feedback from around me, it was making me crazy, because there was something else that people were missing. And yes. I got it when I was sitting in your chair, is that the health of the brain affects the thoughts.
Exactly.
The thoughts affect your reality.
Exactly. You had the aha moment.
It's kind of like a yes, and there's a mass overgeneralization that is not helping.
No.
And so if we can go one step deeper, I just would love everyone to be able to have neurotherapy in their life.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't see why not. So people can do remote training with you. So I'll put in the comments how they can get in touch with you.
Okay.
You are offering a 50% savings to the my network of love on getting the brain mapped. It's like, at the very least, please get your brain mapped. It's information you need to know. Your brain is your most important organ. It's the holy grail of your beingness. Mm-hmm. This is where your consciousness comes into relationship with your body, is through the nervous system. And then, you're even generously offering some savings off of ongoing treatments. So we're making it possible. Please foundationally do this for yourself, do it for your kids, do it for your spouse. Then the other thing is, you're writing a book right now. Can I talk about the Tao of neurofeedback?
The way we decided to use the word. Okay. Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, that's what we realize, and what other people have pointed out to us, is we're really the only neurofeedback practitioners who have a very specific approach to the process. There's many people do neurofeedback. Some do it this way, some do it that way, but the way that I've developed it over 35 years has specific components and teaching to it. And so the way of neurofeedback is going to be a scientific treatise on that, why that works. My wife Stella is a postdoc neuroscientist from Austria, brilliant, and her expertise is brain, and she is adamant that she wants to get this information out into the right hands, where it's not considered alternative medicine or alternative approaches, but rather complementary. Mm-hmm. And so we're trying to get it into mainstream, basically. So the way of neurofeedback, there's probably going to end up being two versions, one for practitioners and then one for the public. Practitioners will be much more scientific and detailed. The public one will be interest and testimonials, like you're going to be in there, by the way. So,
Yeah.
So this is important. I should also mention too, Heather, I don't know how broad your listenership is here, but we're probably going to launch towards the end of the summer a major city tour for myself,
Great.
where I'll go to New York City and people can make appointments to see me for a couple of days, do the brain map, let them know what I see going on. I can give them recommendations, but I want to start taking this out a little more. We're looking at the major cities. I've done this in Europe, obviously, but the United States, I haven't done that yet, which is pretty sad because I live here. So we're looking at that, and it's not on our website yet, but just so you know, we're gonna do that.
Well, I'll definitely help spread the word and introduce you to friends all over the place. And
Okay.
it's the most important thing you can do for yourself, in my belief. And there's also the Brain Sutras, which I
Brain
love.
sutras.
I'll put the link of the Brain Sutras in. It's just,
Okay.
I think really what we're getting at here, again, is that the most important relationship that you have in terms of the access point to your relationship with yourself is through the brain. And your thoughts are affected by the health of your brain. So
You're saying a very profound thing. There's that documentary movie Awake by with Paramahansa Yogananda, the yogi who came here in the 20s. They have a recording in there where he is saying in 1926, the brain and the nervous system, or the brain and the spinal cord, is the pathway to God.
yes.
And what he was referring to is your inner deepest self.
Mhm.
It was 1926.
Yep.
He was saying that. And, and I'm in that tradition, Kriya Yoga. He's the guru of my guru. And as far as I can tell, I'm just trying to prove what he said. Of course, you don't have to prove it anymore. It's quite clear. But just what you said, yeah, our spirituality is, yes, it's this omnipresent metaphysical reality, but it manifests through our brain and nervous system. We can't get rid of that.
Yep.
That's what we're here on this planet for, to manifest our spirituality through our brain, nervous system, and our bodies. So, yeah.
Well, the brain and the nervous system are the electrical system, the hub of the electricity that
Right.
the information then goes through the body, through the tissues.
It's the life force. It's
So
the
like,
life force.
it's as
Yep.
simple as that. And
It's
to
as
think
simple as
that
that.
we can easily have an optimization of that life force relationship. It's like, this is what the yogis were writing on the walls of caves about, people.
Right. That's what the way of neurofeedback is going to be about. This
Yeah.
is very clear now. It's
Oh
not
my gosh.
a mystical thing. Yeah.
Well, when I hear things like this and we have our chats, I go, oh, this is what's going on. This is why I'm in this like dark journey. And it's all worth it if I'm on this path with you and I'm learning these things and I'm, my system is optimizing, the electrical system is optimizing. And just in closing, I wanted to make one comment, and that's just, for the people who are listening especially in my network of love, I've been talking a lot about neurological Lyme disease and my brain inflammation and spinal inflammation. We worked, Marty and I, extensively, almost daily for 10 months. And then I had an 8-day episode that showed us that there's the pathogens, because my brain did what we wanted it to. And I started to get back to work, and it looked like everything was on track. And then there was an episode, and then 5 weeks later, another episode. And that's what made me stop everything and say, I have to take it to the next level and treat this biologically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I'm doing now. So, and I still believe, and that anyone that has Lyme disease, especially neurological Lyme disease, working especially with the alpha theta training that you were doing, is just unbelievable. Unfortunately, I had to move away from Marty, so I'm not in his office every day. If I was still close by, trust me, he can't get rid of me. I have my special chair and everything.
Blanket.
I can't wait for my brain to be back in neurofeedback. It's just the circumstances have us apart right now, but we will be together again soon. So thank you so much, and I look forward to interviewing you more in the future. And thank you, everyone, for listening, and post questions. And I'm so honored to be part of what your mission. So thanks for saving my life, and helping me understand how to come into greater relationship with.
You remember, you saved your life. I just happen to know the information to give your
Well,
brain.
you were the
You
buoy.
did it.
You were the buoy. And
Okay.
I needed a buoy. I was definitely drowning.
Yes, yes, I agree.
Thank
Okay.
you. Okay.
Okay.
More
Okay.
soon.
Okay.
Blessing.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.